Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, we got 5 seconds here. Actually, the microphone should be cutting out at this point, but okay.
Are we ready to go?
It looks like it. We'll see. Okay, we are live? Okay, well, I'll believe that. Then we have our next speaker, who is Robert Patterson. And he's from Wabaneka, Oklahoma, which is, I understand, kind of down in the Creek Nation. And he's known since the age of 5 that he would be working with electrogravitics. So this is a very high-purpose man we're hearing today. He studied vortex science, and then as he was studying that, he saw a Japanese Dogu statue that had electrogravitics and quantum physics encoded in it. He's been a mechanical engineer for 20 years, and then he was involved in a disabling industrial accident, which gave him the blessing to be able to go into research full-time. So here's Robert Patterson.
Okay, this is my first time as a speaker, so I hope you all bear with me and that you all have clean underclothes on, because that's how I was told to view you. On a serious note, though, I began my research approximately in 1980, and it began with a martial arts called Wing Chun Kung Fu. And what this martial arts encompassed was teaching the practitioners to borrow the energy from their opponents. And it was done through geometric shapes. The human body is capable, through the concept of Wing Chun, capable of posing 108 kinetically structured movements and leverage the energy from the opponent. At some point, I began to marry that with the environment through vortex science. And I looked at the environment as the opponent, and I says, well, if I'm going to borrow free energy, I'm going to have to do it through a geometrical shape so I can leverage the kinetic energies. As time progressed on, I began to get into hovercraft technology. And as a child, I actually built several hovercraft devices, one of which was a cigar box with a skirt, and it never would properly levitate. And it was electric, and finally I got mad at it, and I shoved the battery pack into it and the weight of the battery pack, and it sped off across the parking lot, and here comes a car and mows it over. You know, break my heart. Well, as time progresses, family life was very abusive. My father abused us physically, mentally, beat my mother. Everybody has a similar story, I suppose. But we ended up moving from school to school to school. We'd go 2 weeks here, we'd move, we'd go 6 weeks here, we'd move. So obviously, I'm not hindered by my lack of education. As time progressed, I became more interested in the hovertech technology, hovercrafts. But I noticed through my Wing Chun Kung Fu of borrowing the energy that these devices were brute force mechanisms, only exhibiting push. And as I was studying Victor Schauberger, and mind you, I started reading him in 1980, and it wasn't 5 years later that I keep reading and rereading this information, because I just, for some reason, the answers were there, but I didn't know how to apply it. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I began to build my hovercraft designs. I began to incorporate ducted fan technology so that I could have 10-to-1 compression ratios. And as I progressed into my vortex mechanics, and I began to marry that with my Wing Chun, which was borrowing the energy from my opponent, and that of vortex science. And what I realized was you can perform this particular experiment yourself, standing in front of any household fan. You could drop a piece of paper 2 or 3 feet away, and the fan would blow the paper away. But when you repeat the experiment on the anterior side, the back side of the fan, you actually had to stick the piece of paper on the cage in order to get the fan to suck it up. Well, where's the equal and opposite implosion and explosion? It's not there. The fan was designed by a person who only knew brute force concepts. Push only. Where's his equal pull? Didn't exist. And what this tells us is the fan blade is stopping the air before it pushes it. It's totally brute force. Vortex science and the environment does not work that way. It uses push and pull, but in a motor concept. This is what I see has been missed by all of the contemporaries, is that if you're using, I'll use cold fusion just as an example, you're producing your fusion and you're combining your atomic materials together. But there's no cycle, there's no motor concept, because you didn't complement that with the fission process. And that way you're combining your atomic mass together, your fuel, and you take your fission process and you split your mass, and now you've created electrical fuel through a cycle. not one side or the other. It's both push and pull combined, and it's motor and pump concepts. And you have to carry that from square one all the way through your physics to whatever advance that you make it to. If you throw the basic building block of the motor out the window, you've basically thrown the baby out with the dirty dishwater. The motor is applicable. It's got a venturi intake. That's your vacuum. That's your implosion cycle. It's got a combustion chamber. That's your explosion cycle. And if you don't keep that marriage through your whole concept, you'll be riding a bicycle that's missing one pedal. As I continued to develop my science in hovertech technology, I decided to build a saucer-shaped craft. Now, this is prior to me having any internet. I knew nothing of Dr. Mahler's aircraft designs, but when I became aware of them, it was instant that I knew that he was using brute force fans, 10-to-1 compression ratios, and so on. There was still no pull, no vacuuming energy being applied to his push concept. And so I began to develop ducted or vortex implosion fans. You can find this type of fan, similar to this type of fan, in your common bathroom household exhaust. And all it is a little radial fan. But you have to pay attention to the fluid dynamics. When that radial fan is spinning, it's blowing all the air out on a radial plane. That makes a sinkhole for a vortice to occur. Now you begin to have additive torque from the vortex energy. And if you employ it properly, you can, I'll tell you the little story. You see this pump right over here? I made this out of a plastic bowl, put a little 30,000 RPM motor in it, hooked it up to a 9-volt battery with a regular little bathroom fan, and a duct over it. And as you know, fluids hug a curve against their own centrifugal forces. But you see in the radial plane here where the blue circle is, it's blowing all the energy out on the radial plane. But the fluids cannot follow the radial plane because it's got a domed surface below it, so the fluids hug the curves against their own centrifugal forces. So we're turning radial flow into axial rotation. And it's predicted in vortex science by Victor Schauberger that anytime you can combine radial and axial flow, you can produce superconductive anomalies. Now, I made the unfortunate mistake when I pulled the trigger on that thing to run my hand over the pump. Have you ever stuck your hand out the window and you feel how turbulent the wind is? Well, it felt like some diamagnetic force grabbed a hold of my hand, and my hand started being twisted and turned, and I was being sucked into this implosion pump. I had to drop kick it to get it off of my hand. It was going to suck my hand into it. So if you decide to build this, be sure to use a stick and a flag and not your hand. So what I did here is I took the common function of the toilet. You have an annular jet stream around the peripheral of a hyperbolic implosion device. If you want to get real technical, the common toilet is actually a hyperbolic vortex amplification implosion system. You're converting radial to axial. The hyperbolic bowl, you have a vortex, that's your implosion chamber, and your amplification system. So, based on the function of the toilet, if you pay attention to the rim and you have your annular vanes, that's what these fans are. There's 8 fans on the periphery of this saucer-shaped craft. And it runs in like manner as your toilet. It creates a vortex implosion. Now, what I realized was the fans are only brute force mechanisms. So I began to combine my vortex technology, and I made this pump. So this pump would replace this fan. And you want to crack the whip. We've all heard the energy about cracking the whip. Same thing in martial arts. If I want to do something devastating to you, I'm going to crack the whip. Same thing with the energy. Nothing changes from your physical body to the environment. The environment is a bioengineering mechanical device just like we are. So I added this whip action ducting. Now all of this is vortex science based on Victor Schauberger's work. This fan is called a radfoil pump, radial flow pump. And what I did was incorporate it into this whip action ducting. So now you have 8 of these implosion pumps with suction and thrust combined together through 8 individual whip action ducting into another single pump at the bottom with a vortex turning your generating system. So now you have suction, you're being sucked up into the air, and to produce thrust you simply have anti-vortex swirl vanes in the bottom on your stick, and whichever way you turn your stick, you change your anti-vortex swirl, and you can go that direction. In order to go in a linear fashion, you'll have to put a pump system on a rudder on the back so that you can push the thing forward. So as you can see, saucer-shaped technology is not very conducive to aerodynamic flight, except in the vertical takeoff and landing mode. Why is that? Because if you'll notice, the shape is an egg. Large end on the top, small end on the bottom. The squeeze is on the bottom, so you're obviously going to go up because that's the direction the energy is being applied to the egg shape. As I continued my research, I began to marry ion propulsion concepts with vortex mechanics. Same concept, only way I stepped it up a grade. It's a hybrid now. And basically, you're trapping, the contention was to trap an ion and build a repulsive force. Well, that again was brute force. So I modified that and made it an open system and put my ion emitters on the top so that they would get caught into the electromagnetic frequency following that. And below I put the vortex mechanism, which is an impeller fan, and I'm allowing my ion vortice to turn my impeller fan, which is going to suck air in through the top, creating a void. And because it's a vortex mechanism, we're going to actually use the vortex to add energy on a gear. It's just like building a gear. One is air and one is a metallic or plastic or whatever material you want to use. But you can actually mesh the two together. As I continued, I began to look for the best method to bring forward individual propulsion devices. And so I married again ducted fan technology. Now, this is a fan concept. It has the radial implosion fan in the center of it. Now, this fan can be added to windmills. And what happens then is you have your large fan turning this little implosion fan that turns a tremendous vortex that adds energy to the system. So you're augmenting the push and brute force with the opposite of pull and suction. So you have both combined in one compact situation. Everything we're doing is geared towards turbocharging concepts. In fact, the basic turbo that's found on your automobile is an implosion device, is a biotechnological device. Why? It encompasses both push and pull. Brute force push is on the centrifugal or hot side of the turbo. Implosion or suction is on the centripetal implosive side, the cold side. Where do you think you get that kick from? You sure didn't get it from the heat cycle, because heat represents a loss of energy, a diffusion of energy. Cold represents a contraction of energy and gain. So this fan really is just a model or conceptual. In my mind, I would go back to the pump versus this fan. Again, the idea was to blow everything out on a radial plane, causing a sinkhole that would create the vortex and add torque to the system. Now, this kind of gets into a little reverse engineering, and I do intend to shatter your belief systems today. This is the X-29A, Grumman. This is the supposed craft that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico. You see these hyperbolic curves here? You see these hyperbolic curves here. Now, this particular model has canard vortex winglets on it. This one is devoid. If I slice this wing off and this wing off, you see the space shuttle. Okay? You can see a similarity between the space shuttle. If this is truly the craft that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, and it did a nosedive into the earth, what would you see if this portion of the craft is embedded in the ground? You'd see a saucer section. Oh, it's a UFO. Now, the reason that I came across this discovery is something compelled me in 1997, while I'm conducting my research, to go to the UFO 6th Annual Symposium, where Dr. Lee Shargel was discussing this device, and he claims that no one knows which direction it's going. Can any of you tell which is the front and which is the back? Obviously, okay? He called this a push-me-pull-me. Well, only because it can turn on a dime. Why? Well, because of the shape right here. You're simply just using it to hook the air and rotate around that. You're rotating around the vortices. The air is actually moving through cyclonic action. You're simply gearing into that cyclonic action and spinning around that gear. As I continued into my research, I began to find more and more anomalies. I even discovered a synthetic atom and in 1997 predicted quantum dots. I'm just now coming out of the woodworks. I've been incognito. Yes, I was afraid, but you know, they say no balls, no glory, so I'm going to show it to you. The thing is when you begin to get into this research, it gets pretty scary. You're reading about all these people that have been murdered. You're reading about people that committed suicide. You try to go to the academic reviews. You try to write patent applications. You try to write grant applications. They're all rejected. They send them back to you and tell you, oh, you submitted your application too late for review. Your technology goes against fundamental physics. That's funny. I thought I was just applying basic physics as I understood it. So as I continued around 1996, I just had a major breakthrough with all these types of technology. And I'm just trying to build a ducted hovercraft to get over the traffic. What's the big deal? Well, I happened across another image in my mind after attending I'm going to have to back up a step. After attending the 6th Annual UFO Symposium, I began to remember that when I was 15 years of age, I happened to see an alien spacecraft. It's sitting off to the south. It's eavesdropping on our communications. It's watching us. There's 4 stars making the shape of a diamond. Now, mind you, unbeknownst to me, the movements that this craft makes leaves in its light trail a blueprint, a schematic of a circuit. Listen to what I tell you. 4 stars in the shape of a diamond. Bridgestone, anybody? This craft, when I get the attention of the 4 or 5 other people with me, I say, look at this strange shape. It's like a diamond. When everybody recognized that this pattern was in the sky, this top star shoots out into the depth of space, stops, shoots over to the southern sky, performs a loop-de-loop maneuver, continuing on into the depths of space, shoots back over to where it departed, only now it's deeper into the depths of space, stops, shoots out farther in the depth of space, stops, shoots back over to the south, or the west, pardon me, does another loop-de-loop spiral, shoots on back over where it departed, stops. Shoots out in the depth of space, stops. Shoots back over to the west, does a loop-de-loop deeper into space, shoots back over to the south and stops. My jaw drops, I get goosebumps. I'm starting to get vertigo looking up at this thing going out into the depth of space. And let me tell you, that's one deep hole out there. Okay, well, on the final stop, this thing departs and goes so far out into the depths of space, we can't see it anymore. So I never spoke of it again to anybody until I attended the 6th Annual UFO Symposium. Well, lo and behold, here's some footage. Oops, my bad. Puppet Master, thank you. This is the exact same craft as the Roswell craft. Now, it's better observed, when you can get it close and you can slow it down and you can stop it, but you see the same hyperbolic swept forward craft in this example as you do, and that's why I put the picture in blue up there. And if you look at the center of it, you'll see the fuselage, which is right here, is a fuselage, and these are the wings, and they're following this hyperbolic curve. And the reason it's glowing is because it's a superconductor the size of a wing. It's a geometrically shaped superconductor. So the people that are working with superconductivity, if you're making a simple wafer and you're not shaping your electrode, your conductor, then you're not transferring quantum energy because you've got this little wafer there that can't mesh with the quantum mechanics that's occurring through the vortices. We heard earlier about how everything is moving through a spiral. Well, that's true to a degree, but it's the environment that's moving through the spiral. As I walk along here, you don't see me spiraling, but the environment is spiraling. It's moving a spiral around me. So it's the object the object isn't spiraling, it's the environment that's spiraling. So I continued on. I want to move to the next frame. Oops. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, thank you. And move that off of it. Okay. Now, forbidden archeology. This is what I discovered. I'm studying Victor Schauberger. I'm studying aerodynamics. I'm studying ducted fan technology. I'm beginning to marry all this into one congruent unification. Lo and behold, I happened across this ancient Dogu figurine, which is unearthed in Japan, 6,000, 10,000-year-old artifact. And I'm going through my vortex science, and I begin to notice these spiraling motions of energy. Now, mind you, Von M. Green described this as an ancient astronaut. He made similarities, 30 points of similarities between the modern day spacesuit and this statue. Well, I'm looking at it through the eyes of a vortex mechanic, and I'm seeing all these spiraling waves of energy, and all of a sudden I see this vortex on the top of its head. Next thing I notice is this cross-section of a turbocharger, which is what I'm working with. And you can see here's the wing here, and this is it here. And I'm looking at it as the cross-section of a turbocharger. But it's in wing form. Oh, it must be a wing. So I constructed the wing. It's a ram implosion wing, but it's actually a vacuum cohesive vehicle. I applied this technology to my vehicle, and I tripled my fuel mileage. I have witnesses that have experimental models on their vehicles, independent from me. They've tripled their fuel mileages. And let me tell you, we've had some pretty big setbacks. We've had to purchase obsolete equipment, which, like a fuel sensor, and they were defective from the factory, unbeknownst to us. They're obsolete equipment. We put them in the fuel line, they cause back pressure, and half of our fuel is being dumped out the overflow, and we're still tripling our mileage. Unbeknownst to me, the driver doesn't put it in overdrive, and he drives all the way here in drive. We still tripled our fuel mileage. I've written grant application after application. I've been called names. I've been rejected by academia. I've gone to the physics forums and tried to explain, excuse me, your aerodynamics is all screwed up. Oh, you're an idiot. Your science belongs in the pseudoscience ward. They call me all kinds of names, won't let me respond, strip my post and put it in the pseudoscience ward. All I did was apply fundamental physics in the manner with which I understood it. You're going to have to do the same. You're going to have to follow this example. You're going to need this methodology. You have to combine push and pull together. If you want to eliminate the combustion engine, that's fine, but you can't throw it out the window. You have to follow that. It's already been built for you. It's already there. It's intake is the implosion cycle. The exhaust or compression is the burning of that fuel, the explosive cycle, the push cycle. You can't throw that out the window. You've got to carry that all the way through your physics program. Now, as I continued, it took me 6 years to decode this, day and night. I haven't worked since 1994. I was involved in 8 industrial accidents. Let me tell you, when the Lord wants your attention, He will get it. Now, as I began to ask questions, when I finally became computer literate, and as I mentioned before, I'm not hindered by my lack of education, I began to search out like-minded people on the internet. And free energy, I didn't know anything about free energy. I was reading about vortex mechanics and applying it through fundamental applications. I get on the internet and all of a sudden I'm an internet kook. I try to seek out like-minded people and I see this free energy. Oh, there's got to be like-minded people there. It's a bunch of skeptics. And you know what they're whining about? They're whining about Dennis Lee ripping everybody off. We don't need people to be ripping people off in the free energy industry. We have a hard enough time. Look, this is part of the reason why they don't want the energy technologies to come about. Why? Because we've already made contact. This statue is 6,000 years old. You've seen my UFO footage. I've had contact more than 3 times. And I'm able to look at the craft and reverse engineer why is it in this shape by simply applying the physics as we understand it. Okay? When I did that, I'm reading the Anti-Gravity Handbook by David Hatcher Childress. Here's this ancient Dogu statue, which is described as an ancient astronaut. I'm seeing all this vortex mechanics going on there. Well, it dawned on me, well, that's a necklace, but it's a choker, choke coil, and there's beads on it. Well, beads, electronics, ferrite beads. Oh, it's a ferrite bead choke coil. It's a matrix transformer. Okay? So we're matching the resonant frequency of this optical waveguide. That's what that is. We're talking about cavity QED, quantum electrodynamics, zero-point energy, practical applications. Well, take a look at that, and take a look at that. Lenses, optics. See the lens? Slotted line antenna, lumped elements, apertures. Apertures, holes in radial cavities for propagating signals in and out of. By using lenses, we can induce photons to be inverted into our radio cavity. Many people are using the environment, the atmosphere, as a resonant cavity. Let's say it's 3 gigahertz. Well, why not build a radio cavity that matches that? So now we're following Victor Schauberger, who told us to imitate nature. Every airplane is modeled after a bird. Well, why wouldn't we model our radio cavities on what the environment is? We've already got the radio cavity. We're using the environment as the cavity, resonant cavity. You've got to build that. You've got to say, okay, well, this is how the fish is made. Well, let's build a submarine based on that. Okay, well, if this is how the environment works in the electromagnetic spectrum, then let's bring it down to where it's supposed to be. Now, I've got a cheat sheet. I've got to tell you. I'm cheating, okay? I'm really cheating. I have a 6,000-year-old schematic here. It took me 6 years to decode it, and so I know what I have. You have lumped elements. This is the tank circuit. Lumped elements. Here, 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 here. Lumped elements. Spark gap electrodes. Radio cavities. Everybody says, oh, those are breasts. No, that's a female. Well, yeah, because they're telling you that nature's female in an anatomical sense. When a woman gives birth to a baby, if the feet precede the head, it's breech. It's 180 degrees out of phase. That's what we've done with the automobile. That's an egg shape. Go look at the profile. And we put the small end in the front. Why do you think your gas is costing you so much? Because they've created an antagonistic vortex. Any of you golf? Haven't you seen that new hammer club, and they're telling you anti-vortex by putting the taper in the back? You can't change the rules. Nature only works one way, through vortex science. And if you're missing that physics, I don't care where you are, where you think you are, where you think you're going. If you're missing this physics, this vortex science, if you're missing that block of physics, your stuff's not going to work. Why? Because you've forgotten how to build a motor. Whatever it is you're working on, you have to build a motor or pump concept. Now, everybody's talking about ZPE and making it run one direction. No problem. Let's take a turning vane. Let's take a turning vane and induce it in here, and let's put a transformer here with spark gap switches. Let's overload that transformer, and every time those things spark, we're going from AC to DC. Now we're going to load a tank circuit, and we're going back to AC. You guys into electronics? Overshot square wave. Node. Point-ending vector. Point-ending vector. Charging a plate capacitor, T. Townsend Brown's capacitor. Nikola Tesla's tank circuit. Secondary emissions. Reverse waves, impedance matched to a delta antenna. Set in a parabolic paraboloid. Large end always precedes the small end. So you have to invert it. Oh, so we're building a microwave inverter? It's made from ceramics. As you know, information can be encoded into ceramics, and it can be accessed. If you look at these pictures, this is not very clear, but there's a face here in this circle. Every one of these, there's a face in there. I don't know if any of you can see them. I'll try to do my best. There's an eyeball. There's an eyeball. There's its nose. There's its mouth. There's an eyeball. There's an eyeball. There's its nose. There's its mouth. Here's an eyeball. Here's an eyeball. Here's its nose. Eyeball. Eyeball. Nose. Mouth. Beard. Okay? How did this information get encoded into this? Well, how did it get released? Much better question. That picture was taken with a camera with a flash bulb. Well, obviously that flash equaled a pulse, a light pulse. That pulse was obviously adequate enough to release this holographic information. What this tells us is that every artifact on the face of the planet has more information encoded in it than you could ever imagine in the form of holographic information. All the whoop-de-doo about crystal skulls, that's a wave guide, and there's all kinds of information encoded into that, but you have to know how to release it with the proper monochromic pulses. And obviously the simple flash from the camera, why do you think we went to digital? Maybe they didn't want us to catch any of this stuff. I don't know, but that's the information. This is what I've decoded. This is what I've been building. Now, here we can see some more views. This is 8th or 9th century Assyrian BC. What do you see here? The cross-section of a turbocharger. Well, they're talking about energy in an implosion form in the 8th century BC. They're also talking about biotechnology. If everyone here will turn around and look up the nasal passage of every person sitting next to them, you see this right here? What is this? This is a turbocharger. It works through implosion. There's no brute force in this nasal passage. It's implosion. So they're discussing biotechnology, and they're showing you a little turbocharger at its nasal entrance. They're also showing you a mass. You can see the mass here, incoming neutron, and you can see where the mass splits. And this is a chain reaction. So we're talking fission, as far as I'm concerned. The way I see it is, the lenses induce a mass, and that's, to me, is fusion. Combining the mass together, that's fusion. Some way or another, when the electromagnetic frequencies pass down through here, it splits the mass. And when it does, you have fission, push and pull. Choke coil. Now you've got a pump, free energy. This is all based on Nikola Tesla's resonant cavity technology. Anybody here that understands Nikola Tesla's tank circuit technology, resonant antenna devices, and you realize that a Tesla coil is, in fact, an antenna system. You can have a single loop. That's a coil. That can be your induction coil. It can be your tank circuit. It's a coil. It doesn't matter how many loops it has. In some cases it does, because in some cases you can put too many loops and overcouple it, and you're not going to have the same. It's the same. Everybody knows what I'm saying. You're ringing this. This is your tuning fork. And it's ringing at a specific frequency, and you match that with a specific transformer, and that rings to your tank circuit. It's Tesla technology. What did they do? Did the Nazis, did they go out and decode all of this information from ancient schematics? It's the impression that I get. I can't prove that. I don't see the technology that I'm describing here that they were supposed to have produced other than rockets. I haven't found any ancient glyphs that present rockets or any of that type of technology, so it's really strange. There's so many parallels. Tesla, Schauberger, they all just parallel and converge, and it's strange that here we have a 6,000-year-old ancient schematic with the same information on it. Toltec. In fact, DOGU, D-O-G-U, dampened oscillatory gravitic unit. Dampened wave oscillatory gravitic unit. DOGU. It's in English. Go figure. Now, this, you can't see it very clearly, so I'm going to try to give you some description. There's spikes on its helmet, and there's microwave cells, and grounding planes, and an optical waveguide, and a radio cavity with apertures. And right here is an acoustical diffusion pattern. He has guns at his sides, ion guns, and a knot. Anybody familiar with knot theorem, knot gate? He has a knot. He has a waffle texture on his shoes. Why? He's talking about diffusing the energy. You blow all the energy away from the object and you have it in a vacuum. A lot easier to travel, isn't it? So now we can go into wormhole technology. Why? Because we're going to physically manipulate the environment through a vortex and wind up the environment through turbocharging concepts into a vortice. And just like a surfer shoots the pipe on his surfboard, we're going to create that situation in the electromagnetic spectrum, and we're going to implode our craft right through that and go right into wormhole technology. Is it 10 years away? Is it 15 years away? No, it's nickels and dimes away. All the experimentations, it's already in place, folks. It's already in place. Every single experiment that ever needs to be done up to this point of going into electrogravitic propulsion concepts is already in place. You know what the problem is? It's not political. Maybe it is. Bring it on. Okay? You want me? Shoot me? Whatever. Bring it on. I'm walking with the Lord. I got insurance. Okay? Now, so the experimentations, everything that everybody's doing, you're all on the right track. You've made some mistakes. I've made some mistakes. I made some misinterpretations. It took me a long time to get over and backtrack and go, oh, duh. An example is this. I didn't know what a choke joint groove was. I'm looking at my ancient schematic. So I get on the internet. It says, we'll answer your microwave questions. All I have is a dictionary, electronics dictionary. In fact, the way I learned my electronics was I started at the beginning of the 5th Illustrated Dictionary of Electronics, and I read it from front to back over and over and over again, looking for turbocharging criteria. What I found was that the magnetron tube in your conventional microwave oven best matched the turbocharging criteria, albeit electromagnetic versus fluid dynamics. So now we have an amplification diode. Take the magnets off of it, it's a one-way diode. Put the magnets on it, it causes the electrons to spin. Now, I didn't know what a choke joint groove was. How many of you know what a choke joint groove is? This was a big hindrance to me. Doesn't seem like much. So I get on the internet and I ask this microwave question guy, hey, what's a choke joint groove? I've got this electronic dictionary that says it's a groove in a waveguide that allows electrical current to pass through without interconnections. But I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what a feed horn was. I just didn't know what it was. I'm translating this stuff. And he tells me, well, you know, I can read between the lines here. You know more than you're letting on. And you're trying to get rich off of our technology. I wrote him back, said, no, sir, I just need to know what a choke joint groove is. He finally explains it to me. Praise the Lord. Once he explained to me that the choke joint groove was indeed a groove in the flange where you connect two waveguide sections together, and that allowed electrical energy to pass from one section to the other without connection, I broke the code on this ancient schematic. And that's when I began. I was already had all the Vortex science. I already had the wing. I was already putting it on my vehicle. I was already building all the other components, but I didn't know how to build this. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what a choke joint groove was. But once he told me, in 2001 is when I broke the code and I began to build optical waveguide systems and research. What is an optical waveguide? I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what cavity QED was. I didn't know that you could cause the vacuum point energy to be coupled into a resonant cavity. But when I did the research, I found it. And I've just written a book. It's not released. It's 103 megabytes. It takes a pretty big computer to compile that. It's the same basic thing here, only there's far more information there than I can ever present here. Pardon me. Oops. Let's see if I can get this right. Okay. Now, I wanted to join the X Prize. Funny thing, they rejected all electrogravitic propulsion concepts. What a shame. So, unbeknownst to me, I start to do some type of advertisement. So this is a little advertisement. The sound?
Coming to the other side over there. You got the sound?
You're looking at an optical waveguide, an alien technology back engineered from Dogu ancient schematics. You're looking at an optical waveguide. It's the first piece of an electrogravitic propulsion unit. It's the pump. It's the ignition system. It was decoded from ancient Dogu schematics, and I'm inviting everyone to come and join me on this interesting quest, and possibly to even pilot a vacuum cohesion vehicle and take the X Prize. And it ain't rocket science, folks.
I'll go straight to the house.
Engineer from encoded schematics found on the ancient Dogu statues of Japan. Come join others like myself on a quest for the $10 million X Prize, proving the existence of ancient astronauts and co-pilot a vacuum cohesion vehicle of alien origin. Hello, you're looking at an optical waveguide, the first stage of a quantum electrodynamic propulsion unit, an alien technology back engineered from encoded schematics found on the ancient Dogu statues of Japan. Come join others like myself on a quest for the $10 million X Prize, proving the existence of ancient astronauts and co-pilot a vacuum cohesion vehicle of alien origin. Imagine walking a mile in my shoes and having all your hopes and dreams dashed because academia claims they know more than the sum of us here. We are the they. Oh, when they invent that, folks, we are the they. If we don't do it, nobody can. As I reiterate what's been said before, if we don't make a change, we're doomed. We've caused our own destruction by burning fossil fuels and putting technologies into the environment in a backwards fashion. We're applying the physics 180 degrees out of phase. These are pictures of the book that I've written. Basically what happened was this. I wrote Ancient Astronauts, the 6,000-year-old anti-G schematic. This is during the whole time that I'm trying to go through the academic process, mainstream. I was called all kinds of names, told I was an idiot, told I did disservice to these ancient people. Funny, if I did such a disservice to them by translating the language of shaped linguistics that's encoded into this, and you say it's a funerary object used in ritualistic practices, in fact, it's the ritual of the birthright. The shaman takes the dogu with him, and when the woman gives birth, he puts the pain of birth in the dogu statue and snaps off its head. That's the ritual. Well, can you show me this ritual? Well, no, it doesn't exist. This is what the archaeological community is telling me. They're telling me there is no such thing as ancient science. Well, gee, how'd they build all those monuments? Oh, they towed them up a hill with a rope. Did they? No. No, they used technology, very advanced technology. What may have occurred is this. This planet may have been seeded by extraterrestrials. Perhaps we were here, and they were so benevolent that when they came here, now wars ensued and they destroyed everything, but here's the crux of it. They found a very primitive humanoid living here. When they came here, they were benevolent enough to know that, look, if we move in with all of our technology, we're going to destroy that society. And so they said, well, look, let's send all the technology away and live on the same level as they are. But they still have this mental capacity over us. And so they're able to utilize the earth. And so they become earthenware technologists. What do? What's the closest object? A rock. Cut that rock out, transport it, and build a monument. Why? I don't know. They did it, though. So here's a view of the propulsion unit, and it's labeled, but it doesn't look like you can read it. Basically, it shows you that these are coaxial reverse magnetron tubes, that these are plate capacitors similar to T-1000 Brown, that this is the same technology as Nikola Tesla. It's just in a different form. It's still a Tesla coil, and it's using radiant energy. It's coupling zero-point energy into it. It's coupling an atom into the system. It's coupling multiple atoms into that system. We have an atom trap. We have a slotted line antenna, a dipole. It's our trap. We're trapping the atoms in there. We're going to accumulate a mass. We're going to split that mass. And we're going to pump it. AC, DC, AC, open, close, hot, cold, light, dark, male, female, push, pull. Can't break the cycle, folks. It's inevitable. You have to employ all of that. I begin to build a second. This is actually my first prototype. Here on the bottom left, this is my proof of concept model. It's a static model. It didn't work, didn't do anything. After a certain period of time, I got on the internet and began to ask for assistance. And here's what I did. I couldn't get anybody to listen to me in respect to ancient gravitics. So I decided, okay, let me sever myself from my translations and show only the technology, which I could have done here today. Wouldn't I be lying to you, though? Oh, I invented this. No, I decoded this. Okay? So it would have been a lie, and I don't believe in perpetuating a lie. We've had enough problems with people perpetuating crap science, for lack of a better word. And all they did was apply it backwards, okay, 180 degrees out of phase. It may not even be their fault, but it's certainly the fault of our educators, because they should know better. You shouldn't have to be here listening to a shade tree mechanic. I built a second model with the help of people on the internet. They supplied me with some money and some parts. I'm up to the point of building the transformer. In fact, I have all the parts here. Didn't have time to reassemble it. I did, however, build a makeshift transformer. And it's a matrix transformer, which is basically ferrite beads. And every time you pass a wire through the beads, you've produced a transformer. And there's 9 beads per section between the spark gap switching. So you can begin to do the math. This right here is producing in excess of 200 megahertz just right off of it. There's 176 megahertz frequency right there coming out of the end of it. Now, I don't know if it'll detect any of the ions or not, but we have been getting ion readings. And as you can see, well, there we go. You probably won't be able to see it, but the LED is lighting and the needle is pegging.
I confirm.
So there is something going on there. Proof of concept? I believe so. Proof that I translated it from an ancient schematic? I believe so. Now, making the second prototype, I made a makeshift transformer. What I did was, I didn't have enough material. So I took my ferrite beads and I put them on a primary wire, and I pancaked my secondaries to that, and then appropriately put my spark gap electrodes. Well, lo and behold, my core temperature of my body went up, and I felt like I was being irradiated in a microwave oven. As time progressed, I wanted to do some lifters technology. Everybody familiar with the lifters technology? But I wanted to do beamed energy lifters. So I built a lifter shaped like my wing here, and I hang it over my propulsion unit, and it starts spinning around all on its own, nonstop. So there's energy being transferred. This circuit is also an all-inductive device. There's no connections. If you connected it together, you'd dampen the ringing, and you wouldn't get the energy out of it. How did I prove it works as an all-inductive circuit? See this? This is a PVC pipe stand that I built as the table for it. What I did was aluminum foil the PVC pipe so I could have a ground. I grounded my meter, my ion detection meter. I used a little alligator clip, and I grounded it to the framework, and I turned it on. And I'm getting LED readout because I do have a transformer there, so I am getting a lot of LED readout. And so it's grounded, so I can walk away from it. No matter what component I touched in this device, it would peg the needle and light the LED unit. So that right there to me proves that it's an all-inductive circuit. And why am I bringing this up? Well, it's very difficult to translate an ancient schematic, and it doesn't show you any connections. How do you wire it? Well, you don't wire it. It's by proximity. It's Tesla's technology, and there it is 6,000 years ago. And even older. Every artifact that I've examined so far is core-based in biotechnology, vortex science, and electrogravitic propulsion unit. If you look at, it's called shape linguistics. If you look at the goddess Istar, she's wearing a helmet, but it's a paraboloid. She has grounding planes. She has a necklace on, but it's in sections, a chain reaction. If you invert her, she has a set of pigtails hanging down, but when you invert her, they look like the mushroom cloud of an atomic explosion. And you have to play, I mean, this is totally different. I know none of you have seen or heard anything that I'm discussing here, but you have to look at it for what it is. Not what you think it is, not what you want it to be. What it is. And what it is it's quantum physics encoded into every artifact that's ever been unearthed on this planet. So, the archaeologists, yes, they're right to a point. These people lived in mud huts, but maybe they chose to do that because they wanted to get away from the technology. I'm just speculating. So archaeologists are right up to a point, and the point is when they failed to interpret the symbols on these ancient artifacts, I'm blowing them out of the water. All the university professors that have written books and they've written books that these were goddesses and they were used in ritualistic practices. Well, guess what, folks? I think they owe me a paycheck. I'll stand down and conclude. He says I have 10 minutes, so if there's a couple of questions, then fire away. Or I'll repeat it. If you ask, I'll just repeat the question, and then it'll get on the tape like they're looking for. Any questions? I'm thinking within less than 60 days. The question was, when is the book coming out? Less than 60 days. Can you hold your hand up so I can spot you? And yes, sir. The question is, where's the book available? It's going to be only on a CD. Why? Because the graphics. If you don't have the graphics, you won't get this. I've illustrated everything. In fact, every single reference, book, paragraph, page, person that wrote that information is generally italicized or highlighted, and it's usually below the statements that I'm making I'm backing it up with these references. And if it's not there, then I have another page, which is in the appendix, and it's actually it's a key. It's actually a key in the references that I went through to get where I am here. And everybody here is going to need to follow the same methodology. Your devices are just not going to work. I mean, look what I've discovered. And it's obvious that it doesn't work if you just have push or if you just have pull. You have to use the two concepts to make a motor. So if you're building something right now and you're not projecting a motor concept into that device, I can tell you right now you're wasting your time until you figure out that you have to build a pump or a motor from that, and then your device will work. So I'm not trying to cause any hindrance or anything for anybody. I'm actually just trying to help you to see that I don't care what it is you're building. If you're not building some type of pump or motor concept into that, it's not going to work. You just simply don't have the mechanics to make it work if you don't utilize that concept. Yes?
Yeah, how do we build one of those wings to put on our car?
How do we build one of those wings to put on your car? Well, I'm trying to go into manufacturing them, so you may have to speak to the manufacturer. You are welcome to build one yourself, but you know.
Could we ask that you come down to, so we'd like to have both sides of the conversation on the tape. So if you have a question, please come down to the mic. Okay.
I was repeating the question.
Okay.
The question is where can you get a wing? Well, we're trying to go into manufacturing. This is a grassroots effort. You want to know what my workshop looks like? I've got a broke down old porch with a set of steps, and I have to stand out in 100-degree sunshine to try to build something. There's no funding, there's no assistance. Nobody believes a word that you're saying, despite the fact that you have working models and applications. What's wrong with us? What's wrong with academia? We give more credit to movie stars than we give to our intellectual innovators. What's wrong with this picture, folks? We've got to work together. This is the cream of the crop. The speakers that were here, they're the cream of the crop. They just haven't put it together in a motor form. How was I able to do it? Because I went through Vortex Science and I found a cheat sheet. I cheated in school too, by the way. You know what? Maybe if I hadn't have, I wouldn't have recognized that as a cheat sheet. Who knows? Question? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. The question is, who is Victor Schauberger? He's considered the water wizard. And what he showed us was centrifugal shapes, centripetal shapes, borrowing the energy from the environment through vortex mechanics and making tornado-type devices that actually utilize the vortex to transfer energy from one device to another, but in a superconductive system. And the basics are there. So you want superconductivity? Follow what Victor Schauberger laid down. It's there. Yes, sir.
It's really neat to find somebody else who studies alternative archaeology. That's the basis for almost all of the research that we're doing. But I had a question about if you could talk about your implosion wing just to get it down on tape so that we can have that as a record. That would be fantastic. Just maybe some of the mechanics behind it and how it helps with the car or the vehicle.
Certainly. I apologize for not elaborating earlier. Basically, the wing is an implosion device. Implosion is referring to vacuum, suction. Implosion is referring to turning the outside inward. Explosion is referring to turning the inside outward. And so you have opposite ends of the coin. And basically, the wing is drafting on its own displacement. Here's what has occurred. Let's assume this is a vehicle and this is the front of the vehicle. When you put this shape through the atmosphere, you're actually creating an antagonistic vortice. What's happening is when you drive down the road, fly down the road, boat down the lake, you're turning a wave, a counterclock rotating wave. The faster you go, now remember the environment is elastic and has a viscosity. So the more you push this vehicle down the road, you're churning this wave. The faster you go, well, because everything moves through a spiral and it has elasticity, you bend the wave because of this shape. The wave gets bent around this shape and becomes an antagonistic parasitic pull against your vehicle because this shape is leading. Had it been turned around the other way, when you travel through the air and the air opens up, it wants to slam shut. Here's the thing. You get the most dynamic energy from the shortest movement. You don't wind up here in Mississippi and travel through New York and slug the guy. No. You strike him. Okay? Most dynamic movement. This is what the environment wants to do. So the sooner you pick this air up and put it right back where it came from, the more dynamic energy that you can release from that. And that's across the board. We're just using air as the example. Okay? Secondly, the automotive industry put the shape, go look at that shape. It's an egg. When a bird lays an egg, the large end precedes the small end. Otherwise, the orifice can't squeeze it out. Anti-vortex. This shape, if this is the front traveling this way, is anti-vortex. Why? When the air opens, forms the wave, rolls around to the back, it's got a taper. And the air wants to go back where it came from. So it slams shut and squeezes the energy onto that vehicle. Free energy.
Can you explain what the paraboloid in the front does?
Okay.
And how it creates that?
We put a paraboloid in the nose cone. Why? Because, again, if you're putting this shape through the environment, the air bends back against the shape and pulls against it. So by putting a paraboloid in the nose cone, we actually cause, when we ram that paraboloid in the air, we're causing that air to bounce back out in the opposite direction. So we're turning the wave around. We're actually taking the parasitic vortice that's turning this way, pulling antagonistically on you. We're turning that wave around the other way in our favor, and it's pulling forward on us. Anybody can demonstrate for themselves. Take a spoon, take a soda pop bottle, turn it upside down so you have the dimple, and turn the water faucet on, and you'll see when the water strikes that paraboloid that it turns around and comes the other way. That's what we're doing in the air, so that it puts suction on you and pulls you forward. And this is the basic building block for wormhole technology. Yes, sir.
Do you have an email address?
Yes, the question is, do I have an email address? The last page of the presentation. Thank you. tsm@brightok.net. Yes, sir.
Can you figure out how to turn a tornado into a useful or less destructive object by cooperating with nature somehow?
Yes, sir. The question is how to nullify tornadic destruction. There are people that have already implemented devices that do this. There are patents that you can read and you can see their information. They actually built windmill devices that even when the wind blows, it actually creates a vortex inside, which turns a rotor, which turns a generator. So they're doing both. They're nullifying it. They have specific designs of shapes of buildings and stuff so that when these big winds blow by, they don't topple the building because they've made it so that it reduces the friction and goes around the buildings. It's a difficult question to answer because there is a lot of research on that. And my master key in my book actually gives you references to that. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go 6 more minutes.
Thank you. 6 minutes? Yes, sir.
Is you're implying that this is just an aerodynamic benefit from this wing, or is it coupled into something else in the car?
Okay. The question is, are there any aerodynamic benefits, or how is the energy transferred onto the car? The energy is transferred onto the car because we've reversed the suction. We're traveling into a vacuum. It takes less energy to travel into the vacuum than it does to travel against the vacuum. That's what we're doing. We're using brute force. Nature doesn't work that way. Nature invites you in through vacuum energy, through implosion. You can use your brute force to push yourself, but you have to have a mechanism to create a vortice in front of you to suck you into it, so it lessens the drag. In fact, these wings are not even clamped down to the vehicles very, very tightly. They're just, some of the designs that we've come up with, they're just kind of floating up there, kind of a spring action. You know, you can transfer more energy through a spring than you can, some other mounting systems, because the spring has, its compression ratios and everything. The air is what is making the transference. The wing, I don't know if you could measure the pressure that the wing put on the vehicle, it wouldn't compare to what the vortice is putting on the vehicle by using the wing is actually a no moving part motor. Why is that? Well, you have a stator and a rotor. The wing is the stator, but because of its selected geometric shape, it causes the air to become the rotor. So now you have a no moving part motor. Yes?
Can you explain the artificial environment aspect of this?
Okay. He's asking me to explain artificial environment. It's basically we're creating a vacuum. We're going into, again, wormhole technology. And the way we get this vacuum is Because we manipulate the vortices. We can even put a diffusion cell pattern, like a quadratic residue diffusion pattern on the wing, like a golf ball has dimples to lessen the friction and reduce the wake signature. When we put this diffusion cell pattern on the wing, we're actually causing all the energy that's trying to stick to it to blow away from it, and we're engulfing it in a vacuum. So we put this object out into space. What have we done? We've diffused all the energy away from it as rapidly as we can, so now it's in a higher state of vacuum than that of space. So it seeks its own equilibrium. No moving part motor. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are there any mechanical adjustments in respect to the shape of the car and the shape of the elevation of the wing off of the car?
Yes. He's asking for the sweet spot. How do you adjust the wing? Well, yes, there's different heights, but the maximum efficiencies I found with the wing are virtually level. If I tilt the wing or rake the wing and it's excessive, the mileage goes down. Why? Because the wing begins to act as a brake. All these people that have these Suburbans that have this wing on the back of it, that's a brake. That's an air brake. Think about an airplane. What do they do when they want to slow down? They put the air brakes on. So if you're dragging around one of these wings on the back of your vehicle, I suggest you take it off. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I have a two-part question. First part is that your green Suburban outside with the wing?
The question does the green Suburban belong to me? No, sir. It belongs to an independent researcher.
And secondly, does that independent researcher ever get accused of being a militant Star Trek fan?
Most definitely. Yes.
Well, but so how exactly is the wing shaped again? And like where did the wing shape?
It's shaped like the horns of a ram. And a ram is a power sign. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my... Oh, one more question? Certainly, one more.
Does the material you use have a difference?
It depends on what energy level you want to go to. Meaning, does the material that I use to build the wing make any difference in the energy levels that you're able to utilize? Yes, it does.
Have you ever used any superconducting material?
Funny you should ask, because that's what the wing should be made of, a superconductive material. Why? We're building a superconductor selectively shaped to interact with the environment through vortex science. The size of a wing. And it can be scaled down. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you.